There was a really pivotal and defining moment where I was like, I am done. I'm going to do everything that I can to break this pattern and transform it because I am not doing that again. Our relational capacity develops both in relationship with others and in relationship with yourself. It's about being able to stay connected to ourselves while emotionally engaged with another person. What we're attempting and what we're trying to do through this work is move you from an unconscious dependency into a healthy co-regulation. You're going to start noticing you're chasing emotionally unavailable people less. You're going to stop confusing anxiety and stress for secure connection. Welcome back. So if you're a woman who has done years of self-development and inner work, but you still find yourself spiraling or losing yourself inside of a romantic relationship, then not only is this episode created just for you, but you can also click the links below in the show notes to explore our free training on relationship mastery, our free quiz, or explore our signature relationship transformation program, Alchemy of Connection. So today I want to talk all about that transition between self-development that perhaps you've been doing and the self-development that is required for intimate relationship and deeper emotional connection and the secure relationships that you are craving, even if it's in closer and deeper, better female friendships, or it is in romantic connection. There is a particular skill set, there's a particular area of understanding and knowledge that you need to acquire and that you need to embody in order to create the outcomes that you desire. And it's not enough to just simply understand that you have trauma, understand your wounding, perhaps understand your attachment style. It's actually the work of developing the skills that transform those qualities into something that inspires and co-creates the secure relationships that you are desiring. So where I see a lot of women and where I was too is I felt like I was doing all of the things. I felt like I'd done so much devotional work on myself. I'd explored so much and there was so much that I understood. Yet when it came to these deeper nervous system patterns, even though I understood kind of where I'd come from and to some degree how these patterns were playing out, there was a whole nother layer and a whole nother kind of world of inner work that I needed to step into in order to develop secure attachment, but also be able to show up in my life and relationships in a way that I'm not only really proud of, but that actually feels deeply nourishing and it feels grounded, and where I'm no longer getting thrown around by patterns that I thought were going to define me for the rest of my life potentially. So if you're wondering, why do some of these deeper places still get activated in me? And is there a pathway out? We're going to discuss all of that today so you have so much more clarity and you feel like you understand what the next steps are and where to go from here. So some of the work that you maybe have already done would be potentially therapy or coaching, listening to podcasts, probably a lot of journaling, understanding the nervous system. So, educating yourself or, through social media or listening to podcasts or reading books or doing trainings or courses or whatever on nervous system education, maybe understanding attachment theory, doing self-awareness work, maybe women's embodiment work, things like this. But then when romantic connection comes along, because things then become more deeply activated and intimacy and intimate relationship, even if it's with your girlfriends and you want to be able to communicate better in that relationship, or it's a romantic, intimate connection, that proximity and that depth of emotional connection or physical connection asks something far different from us. And so this is where you can, if you're lacking these skills, you can lose clarity, you can obsess over interactions, you can abandon yourself inside of relationship, you can find yourself overthinking and ruminating constantly. You can feel like your emotions get hijacked and maybe you don't know how to sort through all of these feelings and activation that's happening within you. And you can become really exhausted trying to regulate internally all of these experiences that you don't yet fully understand. And so this is what creates repetitive patterns that you can't quite find your way out of, or you just can't figure out, make heads or tails of really what's going on. And so there's that narrative of, why, after so many years of inner work, is this still happening to me? And so this insight and this information that you have gathered along the way is so useful and powerful, and it's gotten you to where you are now. But embodied relational capacity is, as we said, a skill set in its own, and it's not that you won't have acquired some of these skills. Some of them will probably be new to you in terms of really putting them into practice and understanding them. And others may feel like a continuation on things that you already know, but you're just missing the depth, or you're missing a few, bits of insight or awareness to really take the tools that you have into these deeper places. So you can have an understanding of all of this, but that's very different from then finding that courage or having that willingness or having that inspiration to actually truly go in and transform those things. And what I feel to really be a determining factor as to whether people kind of stay inside of these relationship patterns, and, little things will change as we gradually evolve, but nothing major changes because no major transformational work is done, is really the ceiling we put upon what is possible for us. There was a really pivotal and defining moment where I was like, I am done. I'm going to do everything that I can to break this pattern and transform it, because I am not doing that again. And it took me about 2 years from that point of like, that's it, I'm done. And it was 2 years of still seeing the same patterns playing out, but seeing myself show up to them differently, seeing myself respond to them differently, seeing things that used to derail me for days, touch me for an hour or 20 minutes and then barely at all. And so it was a gradual process, but there was a defining moment where I said, I deserve more. There was a defining moment where I said, that's it, I'm done. And what I want for myself and my life is far more than this. And I've let these patterns rule me. Thought I'd done enough to get further than where I was, but I hadn't. And even though I had the tools, I was still believing that was all I deserved. So even though there was tools there, it was the decision in and of itself to say, I want something different for my life, that was the pivotal moment. And there were tools that I needed to develop from there on. However, it really anchors and rests on what you believe you deserve and the life that you and relationships that you desire to create for yourself. If you believe you deserve one thing and that's all you believe you deserve, and you're frustrated inside of it and it doesn't feel like enough, but you're continually telling yourself, even just subconsciously, that that's all that you're allowed to have, whilst longing and dreaming and craving for something else, the shift occurs through choosing to try something new and follow that path of what could be possible if you allowed yourself to have more of what you deserve. And even though that path might feel mysterious and unknown and scary, there'll be a pivotal point at which you say, staying where I am is far more painful than taking this unknown new path that I really have no idea what's going to come, but it's worth diving in. And so you may have done years and years of healing work, years and years of self-exploration, and then somebody communicates in a particular way, or they pull away, or they don't communicate. And suddenly your nervous system is really running the show on a default program based on the threats it's interpreting from its environment. And that is going to lead to patterns that you might find yourself inside of currently, replaying conversations, checking your phone a lot, struggling to focus on other things like work or other relationships, or other things that are important, scanning a lot and being hypervigilant for reassurance, feeling destabilized by maybe even just a single interaction, collapsing into self-doubt, feeling emotionally exhausted by the uncertainty or the ups and downs of your relationships, and becoming hyper-focused on the success of the relationship rather than the success or the status of the relationship, rather than our relationships being one single part of a whole web of what makes us us, rather than being hyper-focused on a certain type of relationship, whether it's a best friend or a romantic relationship, being so vitally important to our sense of self. So if you're in that place where you feel like in these situations you don't trust yourself anymore, you spiral when they behave in a certain way, and you know so much, and you're highly intelligent, highly self-aware, but these patterns of activation keep showing up and they cause you, they disrupt your life or cause you a lot of distress, or you're just done with them. It doesn't mean that the work that you've done hasn't been vitally important. It just means that this particular relationship pattern or this particular relationship dynamic is revealing a layer that your previous level of work could not fully reach. And whether that's because you didn't feel you were deserving of any more, or you didn't know what was possible, or it just wasn't your time and the information hadn't dropped in, doesn't matter, because here we are doing this now. And so I think it's really important to understand that our relational capacity develops both in relationship with others and in relationship with yourself. So inside of relational dynamics where you're interacting with other people, and in solitude where you are listening to yourself and to spirit and to whatever that relationship is that you have. So it's not one extreme to the other, it's a combination of both. So perhaps you've been doing a lot of your healing in relationship, but you haven't really done the work of slowing right down and sitting with yourself. Or maybe you've been sitting with yourself, but maybe you felt a bit avoidant to step back into certain types of relationships. And so this is a titration, it's an ebb and flow between solitude and sense of individual self versus who I am to the people around me or the important people in my life. So, these relationship skills that you're going to develop when you are in solitude with yourself, you're really going to develop this deeper sense of alignment to your own path, your own expression, a connection to spiritual self, a connection to your feelings and your needs, all of those things that develop when you quieten the noise. You think about all of the things that you don't really get a connection to or a sense of when there's a lot of distraction or noise around you. That's what you gather and acquire when you are in solitude and quiet with yourself. Versus when you're in relationship, what I will say about the solitude part, you also discover who you are and how you hold yourself without other people. Do you spiral into loneliness? What does solitude do to you? How does that activate? How do you go being able to regulate things on your own? How do you go being able to sit with your own thoughts? Or are you using other people as a distraction? How are you trying to avoid sitting with some of those deeper feelings or traumas or whatever it is that are happening within your body and mind that staying busy is able to keep you from actually accessing and transforming? And then when we're with other people, we get more of that sense of who I am through collaboration, things that we can't do on our own, things that we, without support, would never discover within ourselves. And then we also get to see ourselves through the eyes of different people and different positions or roles or things that we hold. It's very different to the sense of ourselves that we hold just in stillness and solitude. But we want to carry that individual, that person, into those relationships. We cannot do that if we never sit with ourselves. What we also get when we are relating with other people is that we get this gauge on how do I operate and how do I respond or react when somebody doesn't show up in the way that I need, or somebody disappoints me, somebody withdraws, somebody misreads me or misunderstands me, somebody gets too close, something triggers uncertainty, somebody, tries to test our boundaries. So this is why there is a really important merging of both the individual self and the relational self, and we need to be doing both. And so a lot of the time women can mistake just the awareness that they've cultivated through their own devotional practice, their spiritual practice, their self-awareness practice. They'll misunderstand that and mistake it for a depth of relational embodiment that hasn't yet been acquired. So it's like understanding things at an intellectual level or understanding ourselves in solitude. But then when all of these triggers come up, how are we actually showing up? How do we actually hold ourselves? And are we starting to really work with the patterns to resolve them and alchemize them? So let's talk about some of the work that you've probably done. And then let's talk about the work that you now need to do more of. So you've done self-development, probably mindset work, even trauma education, like understanding the language of trauma, how it plays out, maybe not on a micro level, but you understand that world to some degree. You've got somatic awareness, you've got some form of spiritual connection or spiritual practice. You're understanding nervous system theory like fight, flight, freeze, things like this, attachment theory. You've been looking and learning about red flags and understanding toxic dynamics more. And this is incredibly valuable work. But what I will say is the majority of people will stay at that level of accumulating. Our default in the culture that we're in the time that we're in, is scarcity and therefore consumption. So if I'm scarce around something within myself, a sense of self or who I am, my default from that place of scarcity and fear is to acquire and is to consume. So we can consume a lot of information, and I'm by no means saying that that isn't going in and penetrating and disrupting something and changing things at a certain level. But at some point, consumption has to shift into creation. So all of the information, all of the stuff that you have acquired, everything that you're consuming now needs to be put into practice in terms of changing what you are creating in actual reality for the better. So that's the part that the shift that most people won't do. They'll stay in consumption, scarcity, fear, inside of the patterns. Let's acquire more information. Maybe let's acquire more certifications or qualifications or just more understanding in general. Versus, okay, what am I creating with all of this information? And if it's not what I want, how do I create more of what it is that I want? Because what I see a lot of is usually women are sitting on all of this knowledge, but they're yet to kind of put it into practice in terms of, hey, there's something else that I want to create. And that's when you turn from consumer into creator. And that's a very, very pivotal point of the journey. So what is the deeper work of embodying more relational mastery and relational security actually include and look like? Number one is emotional regulation inside of intimacy. Whether this is physical intimacy or emotional intimacy, it's not just about regulating ourselves on our own. It's not about projecting our stuff onto another person or trying to create space because we're blaming other people. It's about being able to stay connected to ourselves while emotionally engaged with another person. And that comes from what we've spoken about already, is that titration of like, here's me, here's you. Now this is starting to infiltrate my boundaries and my personal space a little bit more, but I trust that I can create space, whether that's through the conversational dynamic or physical space through a boundary. I trust myself that I can navigate that. And so I feel that I can remain connected to myself. If I'm not getting the same emotional attunement from the other person, then we stop giving that person access and we move them further out in our field in terms of how much intimacy or emotional interaction we want to have with that person. And so this is the emotional regulation at this closer and deeper level where we have to trust ourselves in a whole new way of like, oh, I can create the space and the boundaries I need just through my communication or through proximity. And I trust that I can continue to maneuver myself in a way that meets my needs. And if that is difficult because the other person is more dysregulated, more disconnected from themselves, and they're making it hard for me to do that, and I'm regulating myself and I'm regulating them, then proximity. Move that person further out in terms of how much access you give them. After that, the next thing is the co-regulation. So that's being able to receive reassurance without the dependency of being a child. So being able to absorb resource, receive resource in terms of regulation, like what I need to feel calmer, feel more grounded, feel more connected to myself. Am I actually recognizing that? Am I actually taking that in? Am I actually regulating that within my own body? Or am I unconsciously just feeling like I have this dependency on other people and I need them for all of these things, and I'm not actually ever receiving that resource that's being offered? And what I mean by this is, in a relational sense, if we're all growing and evolving together, then people are going to offer us certain types of love, certain types of reassurance, certain words, certain ways of offering love to us. Our capacity to integrate that into our sense of self and into our sense of worthiness and be able to say, hey, I loved how they offered that and that made me feel amazing. Now I take that on as a part of myself, and then I can also pour into others in that way. And I've received that in a way that it impacts me and it transforms me and the way I operate in some way. If we're not conscious of the body, we're not conscious of our feelings, we're not conscious of our needs and our relationship with other people, we're not actually in the felt body, then we're just in unconscious dependency on other people. Like, it's just like, if that person's not there or they're not operating in a certain way, our default is fear. Then we may not even be acknowledging that fear. We're not even acknowledging the feelings. And then there's just this continual dependency on people that we're not aware of. So it moves. What we're attempting and what we're trying to do through this work is move you from an unconscious dependency into a healthy co-regulation. And so that means you're allowing support in healthy ways, you're offering support in healthy ways, you're staying present during uncomfortable moments, and you're learning security and stability through relationship. The next thing is boundary capacity, which I've touched on already, but it is that ability to say no without spiraling into guilt. It's the ability to tolerate disappointment. This is the thing that people don't get about boundaries. It takes some time. If there's no relationship with feelings like disappointment, boundaries remain completely elusive. So a boundary is also the capacity for you to receive a boundary from another person, which means you have to be okay with disappointment or rejection or redirection. If that makes you spiral, then we're starting to see you've got a problem receiving boundaries. And if you've got a problem receiving boundaries, you've got a problem setting boundaries. So you're obviously letting other people take advantage of your energy in ways that we don't want to see and isn't conducive with healthy relationships. It's just not. So we also need to, in boundary work, be able to tolerate somebody else's discomfort. If you're thrown by other people's emotions because it triggers insecurity and fear in you, you're going to have a hard time disappointing another person by saying no, especially if they have a negative reaction to your boundary. Boundary work also means that you are closing off misaligned relationships and dynamics far, far sooner. This is where the guilt part comes up and your ability to navigate that with more clarity and more security. Boundaries is also something internally that stops the over-explaining, it stops the over-processing, it stops the looping, because boundaries aren't just this physical thing, it's around what we're allowing ourselves to feel and the state we're allowing ourselves to be in. And so these emotional hooks, the way that we're acting emotionally, the things we're thinking about, are we creating boundaries about the state that we want to be in? And honoring those and following through and doing the work to create something different. Because those loops are loops of consumption. So when we're shifting from that consumption place into creation, we want to see the ruminating, the looping, repeated patterns starting to reduce, dissolve, and ultimately complete in some way, to some extent. The other thing is conflict skills. just absolutely crucially important. So if your thing is to criticize or it's to withdraw or a combination of both or to avoid conflict, not conducive with a healthy relationship. Not going to get you there. So you can meditate all you want, you can journal all you want. If you can't hold yourself in conflict, even when it is scary and challenging, then the relational work and the work that you need to do to make these changes isn't going to manifest. So those conflict skills are things like staying grounded during rupture, not withdrawing and collapsing, not attacking, repairing after conflict, having repair conversations, being able to express your feelings vulnerably and say that hurt me, not shutting down, not chasing, finding more of a neutral stance around conflict. The other tool you need is secure communication. So you're expressing your needs directly. And what I'll say to this is the solitude required for you to be able to listen to your body and understand what those needs are is an absolute non-negotiable. Your body is telling you what it needs. It just requires your space to actually listen. So then when it comes to relationship, if you're not confident in meeting those needs for yourself, whether that's space, whether that's rest, whether that's expressing a feeling, whether that's tending to something in your life, whether that's nourishing yourself in some way, if you're not confident doing that for yourself, when intimacy comes in or closer relationship or there's a greater threat because of just of general proximity, then that can very, very quickly for people go out the window, which is where self-abandonment then comes up because, oh, when you're here, I stop meeting my needs. I stop tending to myself. And this was a huge pattern for me. But the work of getting really, really confident in meeting those needs and making that a non-negotiable no matter what style of relationship, whether it's just like, casual interactions or it's, a closer relationship, is the thing that changes the game completely. Secure communication is also naming feelings without accusation. It's also being able to ask for clarity, and it's also being able to speak needs and not allow resentment to build. The other skill you need is nervous system discernment. So understanding that chaos and chemistry and all of these big highs and lows aren't, if they're not coupled with a secure foundation, are just relational chaos. That a secure foundation is necessary, and having that for yourself in your own nervous system is what allows you to then co-create that with others in relationship. Things like not confusing intensity with intimacy, not confusing like hyper focus or romanticizing like hyper fixation or hyper focus with love, and not seeing things like longing and yearning and a sense of being without as security and compatibility over the long term. So that is all stuff that we need to understand at a level internally for ourselves, because all of those relate to relationships. They also relate just to our relationship with ourselves, like moving away from chaos, not seeing intensity as something that, we want to keep moving towards and constantly in that overstimulated place. Being hyper fixated or hyper focused in one area takes us away from our needs. So we don't want to do that in any area of our lives. And that longing for anything, like a hunger that keeps us inside of starvation or scarcity, is not building a secure connection or foundation for ourselves in any area of our lives. The other skill you need to build is relational self-trust. Trusting your body inside of all of these new skills. So trusting who you are without the scarcity or without the hypervigilance or without the rumination. Trusting this new version of yourself and how she moves in the world, how she shows up, how she communicates. Distinguishing intuition from wounds and activation. Staying connected to yourself instead of going into like emotional projection. Staying anchored, setting those boundaries. The other skill you need is capacity for healthy receiving. We spoke about this a little bit inside of the co-regulation, but it's massive. Intimacy skills are receptive skills. Can I receive the presence of another person in close emotional or physical proximity to myself? And that amount of sensory information is something that I can take in and receive versus feel threatened by. And by receiving, I don't mean like merging, I mean receiving and taking in information and taking it in as relatively neutral versus I'm taking in this information as a threat. I'm taking this information in as something that requires a chaotic response from me. It's being able to receive a lot of sensory information and input with neutrality. And most of us are reacting, are highly sensitized to sensory input and not in a receptive way, but in an activated and triggered way. So it's the ability to be able to receive consistently, be able to receive care, be able to receive security, calmness, love, receive an uncomfortable moment, a tense moment, a conflict moment, a joyful moment, an agitated moment. It's being able to tolerate stability, but it's also being able to tolerate the discomfort. And then, in all of this, really what it comes down to is that deeper identity work. And it's like, who am I as a secure person? Who am I without the chaos? Maybe who am I without the relationships that perpetuate that? Who am I if I'm not trying to overfunction because I feel like I can't receive and I'm not worthy of having what it is that I desire? I can't feel it. I can't name it. I can't ask for it. I can't set boundaries around what it isn't so I can receive what it is. All of this makes up how you see yourself. And really, that whole process of shifting from consumption into creation. I see myself as a person who is able to do this, and I'm going to fumble. It's not going to be perfect, and I'm going to repeat the same patterns enough times until I get it, I change it and I get it right. Who is that person? And do I want to do the work of creating that person? Or do I want to continue to create the person that is getting the results that I'm getting at the moment? And so I want to paint a realistic picture of what security is, or when I talk about relationship mastery, what that is, because the ego is going to want to associate that with a level of perfectionism or a level of unbotheredness. And whilst there will be a composure and a groundedness and a frequency that you hold through doing that work, it's not about not being triggered. It's not about always feeling calm. It's not about never overthinking things that potentially have a big consequence in your life. And it's definitely not about being, endlessly soft or calm or any of those things. It's about creating the baseline state that is a lot of those things. Like it's a baseline state of calmness. It's a baseline state of regulation. It's a baseline state of inner quiet of the mind. Not silence, not emptiness, but calmness. So it's about creating the foundation of those things so that when we are doing bigger things in our lives and having these closer relationships or doing something scary in our business or our personal life, we have the foundation that can hold us. One of my early meditation teachers, she would always say, we're not doing the work to remove ourselves from life or separate ourselves from it. We're doing it to build the capacity to be with more of life and not to overwhelm our senses, not to go back into chaos and intensity, but be able to digest and integrate more stimulation and more of life's challenges so we can build what we desire. We have to integrate that information back into and let it be absorbed into that foundation of calmness and regulation. So tangibly, as we heal, because you'll notice the internal state before you notice the external results, this is what it's going to look like. You're going to probably wish that the external results were coming along quicker. But you don't want to discount how massive these internal shifts are and how they compound into the bigger things over time. And that's going to be noticing activation far sooner. Showing up and holding yourself differently in the same pattern. Seeing it with more awareness, seeing it with new eyes, seeing it with new clarity, seeing the players and the pieces and the words and the dynamics with more sensory awareness than what you could before. And that doesn't mean more activation. It means I can digest more of this moment, whereas before it was just a bundle of noise or a bundle of information and it would just overwhelm me. Oh, now I can actually start to see what they're saying, see how they're operating, digest the information that's coming in the moment. And I'm feeling more grounded whilst I digest that information. It's also going to look like you're recovering faster from activation or spiraling. You're going to communicate quicker instead of spiraling, making assumptions, all of those things. You are going to stay connected to reality easier. You are going to feel more anchored, connected to your feelings, connected to your needs, connected to what you and your body need in physical reality more. You are going to stop abandoning your needs. That's going to be more of a non-negotiable. You are going to notice that you're choosing differently, and that might not manifest straight away in your relationships necessarily. But what you want to look for is it's the little choices that you're making in terms of like how you treat yourself, what you do day to day, how you feed yourself, how you move your body, how you show up. Like just notice it at that really close, intimate level to yourself. Am I starting to choose differently? You're going to start tolerating more healthy relationships, healthy relationship dynamics. You're going to start noticing you're chasing emotionally unavailable people less. And you're going to stop confusing anxiety and stress for secure connection. So when you're doing these things repeatedly over time, they manifest into this really beautiful reality of saying, oh, I've created this foundation of security at an internal level, which now becomes the security that manifests in physical reality over time. But depending where you are, depending where you're starting, that could take you years. It's also why it's so valuable and worth it. So that secure functioning is just built through practice over time, not through theory and information gathering. So let me give you some tangible examples. So, in the past, you may obsess for 3 days over something. A new reaction or a new response may be, I'm just going to notice that activation and I'm going to go choose to do something with that energy that feels more functional, better for me than staying in the rumination. Even if the rumination continues, I'm going to give myself a different outlet. It's going to help me alchemize and move that energy in a new way. An old response might be self-abandoning your own needs when somebody is close or you're activated inside of an old response. And the new response would be being able to identify there's a need you're overriding and tend to that before you spiral and then before your body is in this entire threat response where you've overridden yourself and your body is not getting any of the nourishment or support that it actually needs to be secure. Another example might be, anxious fixation or over fixating on this one relationship or this one area. That's very different from being passionate about something. Anything in our lives, we want to have this foundation that's made up of all these different parts of ourselves and all of these different aspects that give us a sense of ourselves. It's like the stumps that make up the foundation of the house. If you have 2 stumps holding up a whole house and one goes, we're in massive trouble. The whole foundation goes, the whole house collapses. If you've got multiple of these stumps that hold up the foundation of your existence, and one wobbles, it impacts you. It absolutely impacts you, but it's not the disaster that it was in the other circumstance. So things like anxiously obsessing over this one area turn into maintaining focus on all these areas of my life. It doesn't make us unbothered, but it stops it from being the huge codependent crisis that it is that I see and work with so many women. And so I think we should we'll close it just with a little bit more information, which is if relationships are still throwing you into some sort of emotional chaos that feels repetitive, it's taking away from other areas of your life and not in a way that you feel like you are learning the lessons from it, in a way that you're changing your reality and hey, I've got that information, now I know how to do it differently. Like you can't figure out how to make it different. And you've got all of this awareness and all of this information. It doesn't erase the work that you've done. But it just means that you've reached this next layer where healing work stops being about consumption, or it stops being about some level of, ego or some sense of protecting ourselves through consuming information and maintaining that level of scarcity or fear. And then it shifts to become about building security within ourselves so that what we're creating within ourselves, but also for other people in our lives, is this healthy, secure environment. So you're really shifting the environment that you're creating from one thing to the other. And it's not about being a person that never gets activated or never gets challenged, but it is about becoming somebody that remains connected to herself, remains connected to her needs, remains connected to all those areas of self to the best of your ability, whilst intimacy, whilst closeness is still happening and still active. So if you want to go into this work deeper, you can check all of those links that are in the show notes. We've got free resources, and you can explore our signature relationship transformation program, Alchemy of Connection, through the information in the show notes. And it's been so good. I will see you guys next week.